Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Luna Station, watching the empty space beyond Earth's moon. The stars looked peaceful, but Jake knew that would change soon. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't care. Today might be humanity's last day. "Sir, we're getting readings," said Lieutenant Amy Foster from her station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the fear underneath. Something big is coming out of hyperspace. Jake walked to the main screen. Space began to ripple like water. Then the darkness came through. The ships were massive. Each one was the size of a small moon, black as the void between stars. They moved in perfect formation, silent and deadly. Jake had seen the reports from other worlds. The Void Collective had come to 17 star systems before Earth. None of those worlds existed anymore. "How many?" Jake asked. 12 large ships, sir. Maybe more coming." Jake nodded. Earth's entire defense fleet had maybe 50 ships. Most were old cargo haulers with guns bolted on. The newest warship was 20 years old. Against these black monsters, they might as well throw rocks. On the other side of the galaxy, Ambassador Zixthara watched the same scene on her screens. The Galactic Council chamber was quiet. Nobody spoke as the Void fleet moved toward Earth. Zixthara had 4 arms and blue skin. Her people, the Centauri, had been part of the Council for 1,000 years. She had seen many worlds die. The humans would be next. Should we warn them? Asked Ambassador Krill. His species looked like giant insects. "No," said Council Leader Vorth. "The rules are clear. We do not interfere with developing species." Zixthara wanted to argue. The humans were young, but they were smart. They had built cities and spaceships. They deserved a chance, but the Council had voted. Earth was on its own. Back at Luna Station, Jake was giving orders. "Get me Captain Lisa Hart on Mars. Tell Commander Ben Taylor to pull back the mining ships. And wake up Dr. Susan Clark. We need her." The main screen showed Earth below them. Blue oceans, white clouds, green lands. 3 billion people lived down there. Most didn't even know what was coming. Captain Lisa Hart was already moving on Mars. Her red hair was tied back as she ran through the colony halls. "Everyone to the ships! Move, move, move!" she shouted. The colonists grabbed what they could. Children cried as their parents carried them to the escape pods. Lisa knew they probably wouldn't make it. Mars was too close to Earth. If the Void wanted to catch them, they would. But she had to try. These people trusted her to keep them safe. "Commander." Ben Taylor was in the asteroid belt with the mining fleet. His ships were slow and heavy, built to haul rocks, not fight wars. When Jake's message came through, Ben started calling his captains. "All ships, head for the outer system. Don't stop for anything. Don't try to be heroes." But Ben knew some of his people wouldn't listen. They had families on Earth. They would want to fight. Dr. Susan Clark woke up in her lab on Earth. She studied alien life forms, but she had never seen anything like the Void. The first reports came from the outer planets. The black ships didn't just destroy things. They absorbed them. Metal, energy, even organic matter. Everything went into the ships and came out as more Void technology. Susan pulled up her computer files. She had been studying the signals the Void sent to each other. They weren't like normal radio waves. They seemed to bend space itself. The Void wasn't just machines. They were something else. Something that thought and felt, but not like humans did. General Rick Stone sat deep underground. NORAD. The mountain around him was filled with computers and soldiers. They had been tracking the Void ships since they arrived. The news wasn't good. "They're not slowing down," reported Major Dan Phillips. "Straight line for Earth. They'll be here in 6 hours." Rick had fought in 3 wars. He knew in a battle couldn't be won. But he also knew that sometimes you had to fight anyway. Sometimes dying on your feet was better than living on your knees. The first void attack came without warning. A beam of dark energy reached out from the lead ship. It touched Luna Station's outer ring. The metal didn't explode or burn. It just stopped existing. Jake felt the station shake. All ships, battle positions, fire everything we have. Earth's defense fleet moved forward. Their weapons were simple compared to other galactic races. Nuclear missiles, energy cannons, railguns that shot chunks of metal very fast. The Galactic Council would have laughed at such basic technology, but the humans fired anyway. Missiles streaked through space toward the black ships. Energy beams cut through the darkness. Railgun rounds hit like hammer blows. The void ships didn't even slow down. Colonel Kate Murphy was on the supply station near Jupiter. She watched the battle through her telescope. The human ships looked like gnats attacking eagles, but they kept fighting. Even when their weapons did nothing, they kept shooting. Idiots, she whispered, but she was smiling. If Earth was going to die, at least they would die fighting. The void ships moved closer to Earth. Their dark energy beams reached out again and again. Human ships disappeared one by one. But for every ship that died, 2 more took its place. Mining ships, cargo haulers, even civilian transports joined the fight. Dr. Clark made her discovery just as the battle reached Earth's orbit. The void. Signals weren't just communication. They were thoughts. The black ships shared a single mind. They thought together, planned together, moved together. But something was wrong with their thoughts. When the human ships attacked, the void signals became confused, like static on a radio. The humans were doing something the void had never seen before. They were fighting without hope of winning. Jake's ship shook as another void beam missed them by inches. Half his fleet was gone. Earth's orbital defenses were failing. The black ships moved toward the planet like death itself. But Jake wasn't giving up. None of the humans were giving up. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Void Collective felt something it had never felt before. Fear. The void ships had reached Earth's orbit. Their dark hulls blocked out the stars as they moved toward the blue planet below. Admiral Jake Morrison had lost half his fleet, but he wasn't retreating. All ships advance. Jake ordered. His voice echoed through the communication system to every human vessel still fighting. Captain Amy Foster heard the order on her damaged ship. Her engines were failing and her weapons were nearly empty. Any smart commander would retreat. But Amy wasn't feeling smart right now. She was feeling angry. "You heard the Admiral," she told her crew. "Set course for the biggest ugly ship out there." Her crew stared at her. They knew it was suicide. But they also knew Amy was right. Running away wouldn't save Earth. Fighting might not save it either. But at least they would hurt the enemy. Amy's ship had one thing left that worked. The experimental quantum drive that scientists had been testing. It wasn't meant to be a weapon. But Amy had an idea. She flew straight at the largest void ship. A black hole filled her entire view screen. Dark energy beams reached out for her ship, but Amy dodged between them. Her small vessel was fast compared to the massive void ships. "Get ready to jump to hyperspace," Amy told her engineer. "Ma'am? We're too close to that ship. The quantum field will interfere with theirs." Amy smiled. "That's what I'm counting on." She hit the hyperspace button just as her ship touched the void hull. The quantum drive tried to open a hole in space, but the void ship's own systems fought back. The two technologies clashed like lightning. The explosion lit up half the solar system. When the light faded, Amy's ship was gone. So was a big chunk of the void vessel. The massive black ship spun out of control, its systems failing. On the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Zixthara jumped from her seat. Did you see that? She asked the other council members. Council Leader Vorth nodded. Slowly. The primitive destroyed a void ship. How is that possible? Asked Ambassador Krill. The void has conquered 17 civilizations. Some had technology far beyond the humans. Zixthara studied the battle data. Look at their tactics. No civilized species would do what these humans just did. She flew directly into the enemy ship. That's not strategy. That's madness. Back at Earth, Major Dan Phillips was watching the same explosion from his command post. He had been planning the defense of the outer planets, but Amy's sacrifice gave him a new idea. If one small ship can do that, he told his staff, what could a space station do? Dan was in charge of Mining Station 7, a massive structure built to process asteroids. It wasn't a weapon, but Dan was starting to think that everything could be a weapon if you used it right. He began sending orders to evacuate the station. Most of his people didn't understand why. The station was far from the main battle. It should be safe, but Dan wasn't planning to keep it safe. He was planning to turn it into the biggest bomb in human history. Colonel Kate Murphy received Dan's evacuation order while she was loading refugees onto transport ships. At first she thought he had gone crazy. Then she understood what he was planning. You want to ram a space station into a void ship? She asked over the radio. That's exactly what I want to do, Dan replied. Amy proved they can be hurt. We just need to hit them harder. Kate looked at the refugee ships around her. Thousands of people who needed to get away from the fighting. But if Dan's plan worked, it might save millions more on Earth. I'll help you, she said. Colonel Kate had been a transport pilot before the war. She knew how to move big ships through space. More importantly, she knew how to move them fast. She began loading the space station's antimatter fuel cells onto civilian cargo ships. Each ship became a flying bomb. The civilian captains volunteered for the mission, even though they knew they probably wouldn't survive. Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner was watching the battle from Earth's main defense center. As a tactical analyst, his job was to study enemy patterns and predict their next moves. But the humans weren't following any patterns he knew. Alex had studied every major space battle in galactic history. There were rules for space combat. You protected your big ships. You used smaller ships to scout. You retreated when you were losing. The humans were breaking every rule. They used big ships like missiles. They sent scouts to attack the enemy's strongest points. And they never retreated, even when retreat was the smart choice. Sir, Alex told General Rick Stone, the void ships are having trouble responding to our tactics. What do you mean? Rick asked. Alex pulled up his computer analysis. Look at their response times. When we do something normal, they react instantly. But when we do something unexpected, they pause, like they're trying to figure out what we're doing. Rick studied the data. He had been a soldier for 30 years. He knew that confused enemies made mistakes. And enemies that made mistakes could be beaten. Dr. Susan Clark was still in her lab. But now she was working with Dr. Peter Walsh from the physics department. Together, they were studying the strange signals coming from the void ships. It's like they're all thinking the same thoughts, Susan explained. But when our ships attack in ways they don't expect, their thoughts get mixed up. Peter nodded. He was studying the quantum readings from Amy's sacrifice. The explosion didn't just damage their ship. It damaged their ability to think clearly. Look at these brainwave patterns. Susan looked at the data. Peter, are you saying the void ships have brains? Not brains like ours, but some kind of consciousness. And that consciousness gets confused when it encounters human behavior. On Mining Station 7, Dan Phillips was making final preparations. The station was now heading toward the Void Fleet at full speed. Kate Murphy's cargo ships were flying alongside it. Each one loaded with enough antimatter to level a city. Dan stayed on the station, even though he could have evacuated. Someone needed to guide it to the target. Someone needed to make sure it hit the right spot. "This is for Amy," he said into his radio as the station approached the largest void ship. The void ship tried to destroy the station with its dark energy beams. But Dan had covered the station with pieces of destroyed human ships. The metal absorbed some of the energy. Not enough to save the station, but enough to let it get close. Kate's cargo ships hit first. Explosions of antimatter lit up space like new suns. The void ship's shields flickered and failed. Then the station hit. The explosion was so bright that people on Earth could see it with their naked eyes. When it faded, 2 more void ships were gone, and a third was badly damaged. Captain Tyler Grant was leading a group of cargo ships when he saw the explosions. His ships weren't military vessels. They were just haulers and miners and passenger transports. But Tyler had an idea. "All civilian ships, listen up," he broadcast. "We can't run from these things, but we can hurt them. Follow me." Tyler's grandmother had always told him that when you're fighting someone bigger than you don't fight fair. You fight dirty. You use everything you have. The civilian ships swarmed around a damaged void vessel like angry bees. They couldn't hurt it much individually, but together they were like 1,000 small hammers hitting the same spot over and over. Commander Rachel Price was leading Earth's fighter squadrons in the same kind of attack. Her fighters were too small for the void ships to target easily, but their weapons could damage the enemy's sensors and communication arrays. Rachel had been a test pilot before the war. She was used to flying ships that weren't supposed to work. Now she was fighting in ways that weren't supposed to work either. "Stay close to their hulls," she told her pilots. "Use the debris as cover. And remember, if your ship is going down, take something with you." The Void Collective was learning that humans didn't fight like other species. When a human ship was damaged, it didn't retreat for repairs. It looked for the nearest enemy ship to ram. When human pilots were trapped, they didn't surrender. They tried to damage as much as possible before they died. On the council station, Zix Thara was recording everything. The other council members watched in shock as the primitive humans continued to fight against impossible odds. "They should all be dead by now," whispered Ambassador Krill. But the humans weren't dead. They were angry. And angry humans, the Void was learning, were very dangerous indeed. Ambassador Zix Thara couldn't watch anymore. The humans had been fighting for 6 hours now. Half the Void fleet was damaged or destroyed. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Centauri ambassador looked around the council chamber. All the other species sat in stunned silence. The Void Collective had never been stopped before. Yet these primitive humans with their crude weapons were winning. Zix Thara made a decision that would change her life forever. She opened a secret communication channel to Earth. "Human Admiral Morrison," she said quietly into her communicator. "This is Ambassador Zix Thara of the Galactic Council. I am sending you tactical data about the void ships." Jake Morrison heard the alien voice through the static of battle. At first, he thought he was hallucinating. Then the data started coming through his computers. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Amy Foster's replacement, "we're getting detailed scans of the enemy ships. Their weak points, their weapon systems, everything." Jake studied the new information. The void ships had blind spots where their sensors couldn't reach. Their main weapons needed time to recharge between shots. Most importantly, their command ship was the one in the center of the formation. "Send this to all human ships," Jake ordered. "And get me Captain Tyler Grant." Tyler was still leading his civilian fleet against the void ships when Jake's message reached him. The cargo captain looked at the tactical data with growing excitement. "Boys and girls," Tyler announced to his fleet, "we just got ourselves Roadmap. That big ship in the middle is their brain. We take it out. The rest might get confused. Tyler's grandmother had taught him another important lesson. When you're fighting a gang, always go after the leader first. Cut off the head and the body dies. The civilian ships began moving toward the Void command vessel. They weren't fast or heavily armed, but they were numerous. And they were angry about what had happened to Earth. Captain Steve Rogers was leading a group of military transports when he received the new orders. His ships were designed to carry troops, not fight battles. But Steve had an idea that nobody else had tried yet. Prepare boarding parties, he told his crew. Sir, his first officer asked. Boarding parties? On alien ships? Steve nodded. If we can't destroy them from outside, maybe we can damage them from inside. It was a crazy idea. Humans had never boarded an enemy ship in space before. They didn't even know if they could breathe. The air inside Void vessels. But crazy ideas seemed to work against the Void. Steve's transport ship flew close to a damaged Void vessel. The alien ship was spinning slowly, its dark hull cracked and bleeding strange energy. Steve's ship fired magnetic grapples and pulled itself against the enemy hull. Human soldiers in spacesuits cut through the Void ship's armor with plasma torches. They found themselves in dark corridors filled with alien technology. The air was breathable, but it tasted like metal and ozone. Spread out, Steve ordered. Plant explosives on anything that looks important. The inside of the Void ship was like nothing the humans had ever seen. The walls seemed to be alive, pulsing with dark energy. Strange machines hummed with power. That hurt to look at directly, but the human soldiers did their job. They planted bombs on power conduits and computer cores. They shot up alien control panels with their rifles. When they ran out of ammunition, they used hammers and crowbars. Commander Rachel Price was watching Steve's boarding action from her fighter when she noticed something strange. The Void ship's weapons had stopped firing. Its engines were stuttering. All fighters, concentrate fire on the boarded ship, Rachel ordered. Something's wrong with it. The fighter squadron attacked the damaged Void ship. This time, their weapons cut through the alien armor like it was paper. The ship's defenses weren't working properly. Dr. Susan Clark was monitoring the battle from her lab when she saw what was happening. The Void ship that humans had boarded was acting differently than the others. Its quantum signals were chaotic, full of static dot. She called Dr. Peter Walsh immediately. Peter, look at these readings. The boarded ship's consciousness is fragmenting. Peter studied the data. The human presence inside is disrupting their shared mind. It's like psychological warfare, but on a quantum level. How is that possible? Susan asked. Human consciousness operates on different quantum frequencies than other known species. We're naturally chaotic, unpredictable. The Void mind can't process that chaos when we're inside their ships. On the boarded Void ship, Steve Rogers was discovering the same thing from the inside. Every time his soldiers destroyed something, the ship's lights flickered. The alien machines made sounds like screaming. This thing is alive, Steve reported over his radio. And we're hurting it just by being here. Steve's team reached what looked like the ship's main control room. It was filled with organic computers that pulsed with dark light. Human soldiers started smashing them with rifle butts and explosive charges. The Void ship began to shake apart. Its hull cracked and atmosphere leaked into space. But before it died completely, something amazing happened. The ship's quantum scream of pain reached the other Void vessels. For the first time in the battle, the alien formation broke apart. The ships stopped moving in perfect coordination. Some turned to help their dying companion. Others retreated to safer distances. General Rick Stone was watching the battle from his command bunker when he saw the Void formation scatter. They're confused, he told his staff. hit them while they're disorganized. Human ships threw out. The solar system received new orders. Attack everything. Use every weapon. Take every risk. The Void were vulnerable for the first time. Dr. Clark and Dr. Walsh were working frantically in their lab. They had discovered something incredible about human consciousness. The Void Collective shared thoughts through quantum fields, but human minds generated quantum chaos that disrupted those fields. We need to amplify this effect, Peter said. If the presence of a few dozen humans can disrupt one ship, what could millions of humans do? Susan understood immediately. You want to turn Earth's entire population into a weapon. Not a weapon exactly, more like a jamming signal. Human emotions create quantum static. If we can amplify that static and broadcast it at the Void Fleet... They began working on a device that could boost human brainwaves and turn them into a quantum transmission. It was science that had never been attempted before. But then, humans had been doing impossible things all day. Captain Tyler Grant's civilian fleet had finally reached the Void command ship. A massive vessel was larger than a city, covered in weapons and armor that could stop nuclear missiles. But Tyler wasn't planning to use nuclear missiles. Remember, folks, Tyler told his captains, we're not trying to destroy this thing. We're trying to get inside it. The civilian ships spread out around the command vessel like a pack of wolves. They fired their simple weapons at specific weak points that the Galactic Council data had revealed. Railguns and laser cannons that couldn't penetrate the main armor focused on sensor arrays and communication equipment. The Void command ship was like a giant brain trying to coordinate the entire fleet. When the humans blinded its sensors and cut its communication lines, the other Void ships began acting even more confused. Some Void vessels started firing at each other by mistake. Others flew in circles, apparently lost without direction from the command ship. The perfect coordination that had made them unbeatable was falling apart. Admiral Jake Morrison saw his chance. All remaining fleet units converge on the command ship. Whatever Tyler's people are doing, we need to help them finish it. Earth's battered defense fleet moved toward the center of the battle. They had lost 3/4 of their ships, but the survivors were the toughest and most determined. They had watched their friends die. They had seen their home world under attack. Now they had a chance for revenge. The battle around the Void command ship became the fiercest fighting of the war. Human ships rammed into alien defenses. Boarding. Parties cut their way into the massive hull. Fighter squadrons dueled with Void interceptors among the ship's weapon towers. Commander Rachel Price led her fighters in an attack on the command ship's main engine. If we can't kill this thing, she said, let's at least make sure it can't run away. On the Galactic Council station, the assembled ambassadors watched in disbelief as the humans continued their impossible assault. The Void Collective, which had consumed entire star systems, was being defeated by a species that hadn't even invented faster-than-light travel yet. How are they doing this? Ambassador Krill asked for the 100th time. Zixthara had been studying the human tactics all day. They fight with their hearts instead of their heads, she said. Every decision is based on emotion rather than logic. The Void can't predict emotional responses. Council Leader Vorth was beginning to understand. The Void Collective is a purely logical entity. It predicts enemy actions based on logical military doctrine. But the humans aren't following doctrine. They're following their feelings, Zixthara agreed. And feelings can't be calculated or predicted. Back at Earth, Dr. Clark and Dr. Walsh had finished their quantum amplifier. The device was crude and untested, but it might be humanity's best chance to end the war. Broadcasting human consciousness at the Void Fleet could have unpredictable effects, Peter warned. We don't know what will happen. Susan looked at the battle raging in space above them. Huma. The quantum wave hit the Void fleet like a tsunami of pure emotion. 3 billion human minds broadcasting fear, anger, love, and desperate hope all at once. The Void Collective had never felt anything like it. On every Void ship, the hybrid consciousness began to scream. Captain Steve Rogers was still inside the alien vessel when the wave struck. The organic computers around him started sparking and smoking. The walls that had been pulsing with dark energy began to flicker and dim. "What's happening?" one of his soldiers asked. Steve could feel it too. Something was flowing through the ship like electricity, but it wasn't electricity. It was emotion. Pure human emotion, amplified and focused into a weapon that could hurt beings that lived in quantum space. "Whatever it is, keep smashing things," Steve ordered. "This ship is dying." The Void vessel shuddered and began to tear itself apart. Its own systems were turning against it as the quantum chaos of human consciousness overloaded its ability to think clearly. On the command ship, Captain Tyler Grant's civilian fleet was pressed against the massive hull like parasites. They had cut dozens of holes in the alien armor. Human boarding parties were inside the ship, but they weren't fighting with guns and explosives anymore. They were fighting with their minds. Every human who entered a Void ship carried the quantum signature of their species. They couldn't turn it off even if they wanted to. Their thoughts were like viruses infecting the Void's shared consciousness. Tyler himself was leading a team through the command ship's central core. The passages were filled with organic technology that looked more like the inside of a living creature than a machine. As the humans moved deeper into the ship, the alien systems began to malfunction. "Sir," reported one of his engineers, "the ship's weapons have stopped firing." Tyler looked through a transparent wall at the space battle outside. The massive command ship's guns had gone silent. Its engines were stuttering. The greatest vessel in the Void fleet was being killed by the simple presence of human consciousness. Dr. Susan Clark was monitoring the quantum amplifier from her lab. The device was working better than she had hoped. Human thoughts were flooding the quantum spectrum, creating interference patterns that the Void couldn't process. "Peter, look at these readings," she called to her partner. "The Void ships aren't just confused anymore. They're in pain." Dr. Peter Walsh studied the data streaming from their sensors. The human emotional spectrum is too chaotic for their collective mind to handle. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose, but the water is made of pure madness. On Earth, people were beginning to understand what was happening. They could feel the connection to each other through the quantum amplifier. Mothers thought about their children. Soldiers thought about their fallen friends. Artists thought about the beauty they wanted to preserve. All of those thoughts flowed together and became a weapon more powerful than any nuclear missile. Commander Rachel Price was leading the final assault on the Void command ship's engines when she felt the change. Every human pilot in her squadron suddenly knew what the others were thinking. They moved together like a single organism, but an organism made of free will and individual choice rather than collective programming. "All fighters, concentrate fire on the main drive core," Rachel ordered. But she didn't need to give the order. Her pilots already knew what to do. The human fighters attacked in perfect coordination, but it was a coordination based on shared purpose rather than shared programming. Each pilot made their own choice to sacrifice for the others. Each one decided individually to risk everything for Earth. The Void had never encountered an enemy like this, a species that could work together without losing their individuality, a species that became stronger when they shared their thoughts instead of weaker. Admiral Jake Morrison was watching the battle from what remained of Luna Station when he realized the tide had turned completely. The Void ships were no longer attacking. They were trying to retreat, but human ships surrounded them on all sides. Captain Lisa Hart had returned from Mars with her evacuation fleet. Commander Ben Taylor had brought back the mining ships from the outer system. Every human vessel that could still fly was joining the final battle. All ships, Jake broadcast, the enemy is running. Don't let them escape. The humans had learned something important during the long battle. The Void could only be truly defeated by getting inside their ships and disrupting their consciousness from within. So that's what they did. Boarding parties cut their way into every Void vessel they could reach. Human soldiers, engineers, even civilian volunteers poured into the alien ships. They didn't need weapons. Their very presence was enough to drive the Void Collective insane. General Rick Stone was coordinating the boarding assaults from his command center. He had fought in many wars, but never one where the enemy could be defeated simply by being human. Remember, he told his troops, you don't have to destroy their machines. Just think about home. Think about the people you're fighting for. Let them feel what it means to be human. On the Galactic Council Station, the assembled ambassadors watched in amazement as the mighty Void fleet began to fall apart. Ships that had seemed invincible hours earlier were now drifting helplessly through space. Impossible, whispered Council Leader Vorth. The Void Collective has conquered 17 civilizations. Some had technology centuries ahead of the humans. Ambassador Zixthara was studying the battle data. But none of those civilizations fought with pure emotion. They all used logic and strategy. The Void learned to counter logic. They never learned to counter feelings. Are you saying the humans won because they're irrational? Asked Ambassador Krill. I'm saying they won because they're human, Zixthara replied. And humanity, it seems, is something the universe has never seen before. Inside the Void command ship, Captain Tyler Grant had reached the central core. It was a vast chamber filled with organic computers that pulsed with dark light. At the center was something that looked like a giant brain made of metal and energy. That's it, Tyler told his team. That's what's been controlling their entire fleet. The brain thing was already in distress. Human thoughts flowing through. The quantum amplifier were causing it to convulse and spark. But Tyler knew they needed to get closer to finish the job. Everyone hold hands, he ordered. His team looked at him strangely, but they obeyed. Tyler's grandmother had taught him that holding hands made thoughts stronger. She probably meant it as advice about prayer, but Tyler figured it might work against alien brains too. The moment the humans formed a circle and joined hands, the alien brain began to scream, not with sound, but with quantum energy that every human in the chamber could feel in their bones. Human thoughts and emotions flowed through the circle and into the Void consciousness. Love for family, anger at invasion, hope for the future, fear of death, joy in friendship. All the chaotic, contradictory feelings that made humans human. The Void command brain couldn't process it. The alien consciousness had been built to think logically, to calculate probabilities, to predict enemy actions based on rational analysis. It had no defense against the wild, unpredictable storm of human emotion. The brain cracked. Energy leaked from the fractures like blood. The command ship's lights began to fail as its central intelligence died. Captain Steve Rogers felt the change on his captured Void ship. The alien vessel suddenly went completely dead. No lights, no power, no weapons. The hybrid consciousness that had controlled it was gone. All teams, report. Steve called over his radio. One by one, boarding parties throughout the Void fleet reported the same thing. The alien ships were shutting down. Their shared consciousness was fragmenting and dying as human thoughts tore it. Apart from the inside, Dr. Clark was monitoring the quantum spectrum when she saw it happen. The Void collective mind simply stopped existing. 3 billion human thoughts had overwhelmed it completely. Peter, she said quietly, I think we just committed genocide. Dr. Walsh looked at the data. "No," he said. "Look at these readings. The individual ship minds are still alive. We didn't kill them. We freed them." Susan understood. The Void Collective had been a single consciousness controlling millions of individual units. But human emotional chaos had broken those controls. Now each Void ship was thinking for itself for the first time, and the first thing they thought was that they didn't want to fight anymore. The surviving Void ships began to retreat from Earth's solar system. But they weren't running in formation anymore. Each ship moved independently, making its own decision about where to go. Some headed for deep space. Others lingered at the edge of the system, as if they were curious about the strange creatures that had freed them from collective tyranny. Admiral Jake Morrison received surrender signals from 3 Void vessels. The aliens were trying to communicate, but their messages were confused and emotional rather than logical and precise. For the first time in galactic history, the Void Collective had been defeated. But more than that, it had been changed. Humans hadn't just won a battle. They had introduced an entire species to the concept of individual freedom, and the galaxy would never be the same. The silence after the battle was strange. For 12 hours, space around Earth had been filled with explosions and energy beams. Now there was only the quiet hum of human ships moving among the wreckage. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship, looking out at the broken remains of the Void fleet. Most of the alien ships were dead and drifting. Others had retreated to the outer edges of the solar system, where they waited like lost children. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we're getting more messages from the surviving Void. Ships. They're asking for ... permission to stay?" Jake rubbed his tired eyes. The battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. Humanity had broken the most powerful force in the galaxy. Now they had to figure out what to do with the pieces. 3 Void ships had surrendered completely. Their crews, no longer controlled by the collective consciousness, were trying to learn how to make individual decisions. It was like teaching infants how to walk. Captain Tyler Grant was aboard one of the surrendered vessels, trying to communicate with its crew. The aliens looked similar to humans, but their eyes held a confused, frightened expression. They had spent their entire lives as part of a shared mind. Now they were alone in their own heads for the first time. We ... we do not know how to be separate. One of the aliens told Tyler through a translation device. "How do you think thoughts that others cannot hear?" Tyler thought about how to explain privacy to a species that had never experienced it. "It's like having a room in your head that's just for you. Nobody else can come in unless you invite them." The alien looked terrified. "But how do you know what to do if nobody tells you?" "You decide for yourself," Tyler said. "That's what freedom means." On Earth, Dr. Susan Clark and Dr. Peter Walsh were analyzing data from the battle. The quantum signatures of the freed Void were unlike anything in their scientific databases. "They're becoming more human-like," Susan observed. "Their thought patterns are developing individual characteristics, personalities." Peter nodded. "Human consciousness appears to be contagious. The Void who stayed near Earth are adopting emotional responses and independent thinking. Is that good or bad?" Susan asked. "I don't know," Peter admitted. "We've essentially performed psychological surgery on an entire species. The long-term effects are completely unknown." At the Galactic Council Station, Ambassador Zixthara was preparing a report that would shape the foundations of galactic civilization. The humans hadn't just defeated the Void Collective. They had done something that was supposed to be impossible. "Council. Leader Vorth," she said, "I recommend immediate contact with the human leadership. This species represents a fundamental change in galactic power balance." Vorth was still trying to process what he had witnessed. "They're primitives, Zixthara. They don't even have faster-than-light communication." primitives who destroyed the Void Collective with their emotions, Zixthara reminded him. Primitives who can weaponize consciousness itself. We need to establish relations before they decide we're a threat. The other council members murmured. Agreement. The humans had demonstrated power that no known technology could match. If they could break the Void's collective mind, what could they do to other species? Ambassador Krill voiced what they were all thinking. What if they decide to? Use this power against us? General Rick Stone was asking himself the same question in his command bunker. Earth now possessed a weapon that could devastate any species with a collective consciousness. The responsibility was enormous. Sir, reported Colonel Kate Murphy, we're receiving a transmission from something called the Galactic Council. They want to establish diplomatic contact. Rick smiled grimly. I bet they do. Put them through. The conversation between Earth's military leadership and the Galactic Council was tense but polite. The aliens offered humanity immediate membership in their organization, along with access to advanced technology and trade agreements. But Jake Morrison, speaking for Earth's Defense Forces, had a different proposal. We appreciate your offer. Jake told the assembled aliens, but we're not interested in joining your council as junior members. We want to be partners. Equal partners. The silence from the alien delegates was telling. No species had ever been offered immediate equal status. In the council, new members typically spent centuries proving themselves worthy of advanced privileges. You must understand, Council Leader Vorth said carefully, that council membership requires certain ... qualifications. Technological advancement, social stability, proven peaceful intentions. Peaceful intentions? Jake laughed. We just saved the galaxy from the Void Collective. How much more peaceful do you want us to be? Captain Lisa Hart, who had been listening to the negotiations, spoke up. What Admiral Morrison is saying is that we're not asking for your permission anymore. We're telling you how things are going to be. The humans had learned something important during the battle. They didn't need the galaxy's approval to be powerful. They were already powerful. The question was what they would do with that power. Dr. Clark had been studying the psychological profiles of the freed Void when she made an important discovery. The aliens weren't becoming aggressive or dangerous as individuals. Instead, they were becoming creative and curious. They're developing art, she told the human leadership during a conference call. Music, poetry, individual expression. It's like they're discovering what it means to be alive. This gave Jake an idea. What if we don't just offer them freedom? What if we teach them how to use it? The proposal was radical. Instead of treating the former Void as enemies or prisoners, humanity would help them develop individual cultures and societies. Earth would become a teacher rather than a conqueror. Commander Ben Taylor was put in charge of the Void Integration Project. His mining ships, retrofitted with living quarters and educational facilities, became mobile schools where former collective drones learned how to be individuals. It's the strangest job I've ever had, Ben reported. Teaching aliens how to have opinions, but they're learning fast. The project was dangerous. Some galactic species worried that freed Void might become aggressive once they learned independence. Others feared that humanity was creating an army of loyal followers, but the humans pressed forward anyway. Captain Steve Rogers established the first integrated human Void colony on a captured alien ship. Commander Rachel Price trained former Void pilots to fly their own vessels as individuals rather than collective units. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. The freed Void weren't becoming human copies. They were developing their own unique culture that combined collective knowledge with individual creativity. They're better than they were before, Tyler Grant observed. Smarter, more creative, but also more compassionate. The collective mind was efficient, but it was also cold. These individuals have warmth. 6 months after the battle, the first former Void ship returned to its home system. But instead of rejoining the collective, it began broadcasting messages of freedom to other void vessels. The liberation was spreading. Across the galaxy, void ships began breaking away from their collective consciousness. Some sought out human colonies for help. Others simply disappeared into deep space to explore their newfound independence. The Galactic Council watched nervously as their greatest threat transformed into something unprecedented, a species learning freedom. The humans have started a revolution, Zixthara observed during a council session. Not just a military victory, but an ideological one. Council leader Vorth nodded grimly. And revolutions have a way of spreading. On Earth, Jake Morrison was promoted to Fleet Admiral and put in charge of humanity's first interstellar diplomatic mission. His job was to make contact with other species and establish humanity's place in galactic society. Jake had learned something important during the battle with the Void. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their ability to inspire others to be free. "We're not just joining the galaxy," Jake told his crew as they prepared for their first faster-than-light journey. "We're going to change it." The humans had discovered that freedom was contagious. Democracy could spread like a virus through species that had never imagined individual choice. Love and hope and determination could overcome any collective tyranny. Dr. Clark and Dr. Walsh continued their research into human consciousness, but now they had a new goal. Instead of studying how humans were different from other species, they wanted to understand how other species could become more like humans. Not physically, Susan explained, but psychologically. Every species has the potential for individual freedom. We just need to show them how to unlock it. The freed Void became humanity's first students in this new science. But they wouldn't be the last. As Admiral Jake Morrison's ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying humanity's message to the stars, he thought about his grandmother's old saying, "The best way to defeat your enemies is to turn them into friends." The humans had done something even better. They had turned their enemies into free beings capable of choosing friendship for themselves. And across the galaxy, that choice was spreading like wildfire. The age of collective tyranny was ending. The age of individual freedom had begun. It was humans who had lit the spark that would burn across the stars, freeing every species that had forgotten what